We're going tomorrow, Mom. I've sold your beach house. But what she didn't know was that the buyer had paid me 3 times its market value in crisp, unmarked bills, delivered in 2 black duffel bags at 3 a.m. 2 nights ago, and that the man who handed them over had a scar running from his left ear to the corner of his mouth like a zipper that had been forced open once and never quite closed again. I said the words lightly, almost cheerfully, the way you announce a surprise birthday trip. Mom was sitting on the old wicker chair on the porch of the city apartment, the one she hated because it faced a brick wall instead of the sea. She had a cup of chamomile balanced on her knee and the afternoon sun was doing its best to pretend it was still summer. Her eyes, the pale blue they'd turned after the stroke, lifted slowly to mine. You did what? The cup trembled. A small tide of tea slid over the rim and stained her skirt the color of wet sand. It was time, Mom. The taxes, the upkeep, the storms eating the foundation. You haven't been there in 4 years. I got a good price. I smiled the way realtors teach you, teeth first, remorse later. She stared at me for a long time, long enough for a cloud to cross the sun and retreat again. Then she set the cup on the floorboards with the care of someone lowering a sleeping child into a crib. That house watched me bury your father, she said quietly. It watched you learn to walk. It watched me learn to live without him. And now you've sold it to strangers. Not strangers, I corrected, too fast. A private buyer. Cash deal. Very motivated. She didn't ask how motivated. She simply closed her eyes, and I felt the familiar twist in my gut that always came when I disappointed her. It had started when I was 8 and stole $20 from her purse for arcade tokens, and apparently it had never left. That night I couldn't sleep. The duffel bags were hidden behind the false panel in my closet, the one Dad had built for Christmas presents and emergency whiskey. $6 million in hundreds. Enough to vanish. Enough to start over in a country that didn't ask questions if your passport was thick with stamps and your smile was thicker. I sat on the edge of my bed and counted bricks of cash the way other people count sheep, but sleep still wouldn't come. I kept seeing the scarred man's face when he handed over the bags. He hadn't smiled. He'd said only 6 words. Keys by noon. Don't be late. Then he melted back into the dark like he'd been stitched from it. The beach house had been on the market for 14 months. 14 months of 0 offers, not even lowballs. The realtor had started calling it, the pretty widow on the bluff that nobody wants to date. Then, 3 weeks ago, an email from an unregistered account, we'll pay whatever you ask. Name the number. I'd named a number so absurd I laughed while typing it. They wired a non-refundable deposit the same day. No inspection, no appraisal, no questions. Mom's doctor had given her 6 months, maybe 8. The new treatment in Switzerland cost more than most people's houses. I kept telling myself that was the reason. I kept telling myself a lot of things. At 2:17 a.m. my phone buzzed on the nightstand. Unknown number. I answered because insomnia makes cowards brave. You told her, the scarred man said. It wasn't a question. How did you? Tomorrow you bring the keys to the pier at Crescent Cove. Alone. 10 a.m. If anyone follows you, if you bring police, if you so much as breathe wrong, we burn the house down with her memories still inside it. Understood. The line went dead. I sat very still, listening to the blood in my ears. Then I opened the closet, unzipped one bag, and took out 5 stacks of hundreds. I put them in a grocery bag, added a note that said for Switzerland, love always, and left it on the kitchen table where Mom would find it at breakfast. I wrote it in Dad's old handwriting. I'd practiced for years as a teenager forging sick notes. She would believe it was from him somehow, from beyond, the way she still set an extra plate at dinner sometimes. Then I took the rest of the money, the signed deed, and the keys, and I drove south through the night. The beach house looked smaller than I remembered, hunched against the dawn like it already knew it had been betrayed. The for sale sign lay face down in the dunes, as if the house had tried to hide its shame. I parked in the crushed shell driveway and sat in the car until the sun cleared the horizon and painted the windows gold. Inside, everything smelled of salt and absence. Mom had left it exactly as it was the last time she visited. The same faded quilts, the same half-burned candles, Dad's reading glasses still open on the nightstand like he might walk in any minute complaining about the gulls. I walked from room to room touching things I hadn't touched in years. The chipped conch shell we used as an ashtray, the driftwood carving of a mermaid I'd made in 6th grade, the photograph of the 3 of us laughing so hard Mom's eyes were shut. At 9:42 I locked the door behind me for the last time and slipped the keys into an envelope. I wrote no name on the front. Crescent Cove Pier was deserted except for an old man fishing with a broken reel and a teenager filming TikToks of herself crying about something. I walked to the far end where the planks were splintered and the railing sagged like loose teeth. The scarred man was already there, wearing the same black windbreaker, hood up despite the warmth. He didn't speak. He simply held out his hand. I gave him the envelope. He opened it, checked the keys, then looked past me toward the parking lot. "She's not coming," I said. His eyes flicked back. "You sure? She thinks I'm taking her to lunch. She's wearing the blue dress she wore to Dad's funeral because she said it's a good day to remember him." Something moved behind the scar, regret maybe, or recognition. Then it was gone. He reached inside his jacket and pulled out a second envelope, thicker than mine. "Title transfer addendum," he said. "Needs your signature." I took the pen he offered. The paper was warm from his body. At the bottom was a line for my name and, beneath it, a second line already signed in handwriting I hadn't seen in 12 years. Dad's handwriting. My knees buckled. I grabbed the railing to stay upright. "How?" I managed. The scarred man looked almost gentle. "He didn't die in that car crash, son. He just died to you." The world tilted, narrowed to the impossible loops and slashes of a dead man's name. "Your father owed people," the man continued. "Bad people. Worse than me. He faked the accident, took the insurance, planned to disappear. But he couldn't leave her. So he hid the money instead, in the one place she'd never sell. The house was never yours to sell. It was always his safe." I stared at the signature until the letters blurred. "He's been watching," the man said. "All these years. Waiting for her to let go. When you put it on the market, he knew it was time." The teenager on the pier laughed at something on her phone, a bright careless sound. "Where is he?" My voice cracked like the boards under my feet. The man pointed past me, toward the bluff. I turned. A figure stood at the edge of the dunes where wild sea oats bowed in the wind. Tall, thinner than memory, hair gone gray but still thick, still curling at the collar the way it always had. He raised one hand, not quite a wave, not quite a greeting. The scarred man was already walking away. I heard his footsteps recede, then nothing but gulls and my own heartbeat. I don't know how long I stood there. Long enough for the sun to climb higher and burn the mist off the water. Long enough for the old fisherman to pack up and leave without catching anything. When I finally moved, my legs carried me up the sandy path to the house. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the air was different, lived in. A coffee mug steamed on the counter. Bacon scented the kitchen. He was sitting at the table, elbows on the scarred oak, hands wrapped around a second mug like he'd been waiting for the water to boil. He looked up when I stepped inside. His eyes were the same gray-green as the winter sea. "Hello, Jamie," he said, as if 12 years were 12 minutes. I couldn't speak. My throat had turned to salt. He pushed the second mug toward the empty chair. "Sit. Your mother always said you took yours with too much milk." The chair scraped when I pulled it out. My hands shook so badly I couldn't lift the cup. "How?" I said again. It seemed to be the only word I had left. He sighed the way he used to when I brought home a bad report card, not angry, just tired of the world's stubborn math. "I never meant for it to go this long," he said. 1 year became 2. 2 became 5. The people I owed, they don't forget. But they're patient if the debt stays buried. The house was the burial ground. As long as she kept it, I stayed dead. When you sold it, he spread his hands, helpless. The shovel came out. I found my voice. She needed treatment. Switzerland. 6 figures a month. I thought. I know what you thought. His smile was small and crooked. You thought like a son. I looked around the kitchen, at the calendar still open to the month he disappeared, at the magnet poetry on the fridge that spelled out "I miss you" in Mom's neat letters. "She's coming tomorrow," I whispered. "I told her we were going tomorrow." He nodded slowly. "I know. What happens when she sees you?" He didn't answer right away. He sipped his coffee, grimaced, it had gone cold. "I've had 12 years to rehearse that conversation," he said finally. "Still don't know the first line." I laughed then, a sound like something breaking open. He laughed too, and for a moment we were father and son again, sharing a private joke no one else would understand. Outside, the tide was coming in, steady and relentless, the way it always had. Mom stepped out of the car at 10:03 the next morning, squinting against the glare off the water. She was wearing the blue dress, the one with tiny white anchors along the hem, and the sun hat I'd bought her the last summer we were all together. Her hands clutched the straw purse like it might fly away. I'd spent the night on the couch with the television muted, watching infomercials for things I didn't need while my father slept in the master bedroom he'd shared with her for 23 years. We hadn't spoken much after the first hour. There didn't seem to be words big enough. Now he stood on the porch steps, half hidden by the screen door, waiting for the moment she saw him. She saw me first. "You're early," she called, smiling the way she did when she thought the day might be kind. "I thought we'd have lunch in town first." I couldn't answer. My mouth was full of sand. She climbed the path slowly. Her hip had been bothering her since the stroke, and when she reached the top step the screen door creaked open. Time did something strange then. It stretched, folded, snapped. Mom stopped moving. The purse slipped from her fingers and spilled sunglasses, tissues, a bottle of pills across the welcome mat that still read the Harringtons in faded rope letters. He stepped forward into the sunlight. For a long time no one spoke. Even the gulls held their breath. Then Mom made a sound. Not a word, not a cry, something older. She took one step, then another, until she was close enough to touch him. Her hand rose, trembling, and traced the air an inch from his cheek as if he might dissolve. "You're too thin," she said. It broke him. He folded forward like a man who'd been holding his spine straight for 12 years by sheer will, and she caught him the way she always had, arms strong despite everything. I stood off to the side feeling like an intruder in my own life. They stayed like that until the sun climbed high enough to make the porch too warm. Then Mom pulled back, cupped his face in both hands, and looked at him with an expression I'd never seen before, love so fierce it looked like anger. "You left me," she said. "I know. You let me bury an empty box. I know. You watched your son grow into a man who sold his mother's house to save her." His eyes flicked to me, wet and shining. "I know." She slapped him then, open-palmed across the cheek. The sound cracked like driftwood on the rocks below. He didn't flinch. After that she kissed him, hard, like she was trying to pour 12 years of grief and rage and longing straight down his throat. I looked away. When I looked back they were holding each other again, swaying slightly as if the earth had tilted and they were the only thing keeping it level. Eventually Mom turned to me. Her mascara had run in perfect parallel lines down her cheeks. "Come here," she said. I went. She pulled me into the circle of them until the three of us stood tangled together on the porch like shipwreck survivors clinging to the same piece of wreckage. Inside, we sat at the kitchen table and drank coffee that tasted like forgiveness and lies in equal measure. Dad told the story in pieces: debts from a business deal gone septic, Russian money, threats against us if he didn't disappear. How he'd staged the crash, how he'd lived in a studio apartment 40 miles inland under the name Paul Mercer, how he drove past the house every Thursday night just to see her light in the window. Mom listened without interrupting. When he finished she reached across the table and took his hand. "You should have trusted me," she said. "I was trying to protect you. Next time you decide to die," she told him, "ask me first." He laughed until he cried. She cried until she laughed. I sat there stunned by the simple miracle of them filling each other's silences again. That afternoon we walked the beach like we used to, Mom in the middle, one hand in mine, one in his. The tide had washed away our footprints from yesterday. The sand was blank and waiting. At dusk we built a fire in the pit Dad had dug the year I turned 10. We roasted marshmallows that burned black and tasted perfect. Mom fell asleep leaning against Dad's shoulder, the way she always had, and he looked at me over the top of her head. "I'm proud of you," he said quietly. "For selling your hiding place. For trying to save her. Even if you had to sell your soul to do it." I poked the fire. Sparks rose like tiny fleeing stars. "What happens now?" I asked. He was silent a long time. The ocean filled the space between heartbeats. "The people I owed," he said finally, "they're gone. Heart attacks, prison, one inconvenient boating accident. The debt died with them. I've been free for 3 years and too scared to come home." Mom stirred in her sleep, murmured something about tides. "So we stay," I said. It wasn't a question. "We stay," he confirmed. Later, when the fire was embers and Mom had gone inside to bed, our bed, their bed, he and I sat on the porch steps sharing a beer the way we never got to when I was growing up. I kept every birthday card you sent, the forwarding address, he said. Read them until the paper tore. I nodded, throat thick. I'm sorry I made you into someone who could sell his mother's house. I'm not, I said, surprising myself. Because it brought you back. He put an arm around my shoulders, heavy and real and warm. Above us the stars were thick as spilled salt. The house creaked around us, settling into itself again, the way old houses do when they remember who they belong to. Tomorrow we would call the Swiss clinic and cancel the treatment. The stroke had taken less than the doctors predicted, and love, it turned out, was cheaper than experimental trials. We would repaint the shutters the exact shade of blue Mom loved. We would plant new sea oats along the bluff to hold the sand in place. And we would never sell the beach house again. Because some things aren't property. They're promises written in salt and pine and the particular angle of sunlight at 6:42 p.m. in late November when the water turns the color of forgiven sins. Years later, when people asked how my father came back from the dead, I would tell them the short version, love and bad bookkeeping. But the truth was simpler and more impossible. We're going tomorrow, Mom. I've sold your beach house. But what she didn't know was that sometimes selling the thing you love most is the only way to finally bring it home.